Evening everybody, let's crack on with dram number 211. So this particular one is a donation from Andrew A.P. Butler. Thank you very much, Andrew, for this one. And this is called Gibson's Finest, but for some reason I kept calling this Gibson's Choice. So when I was looking on the net, I wasn't finding much information about it. I think I was getting confused with Hobson's Choice. So it's Gibson's Finest, which is a Canadian whisky that started off in Pennysylvania, of all places. It was Gibson was a Scottish immigrant called John Gibson, who founded a distillery in 1923 in Pennsylvania, which was a rye whisky, which was in the Monongahela style, which we have covered once before, which was the Rittenhouse 25-year-old, which is one of the best whiskies I have ever had. So hopes are up for this one, although this is now clearly a completely different beast altogether. So 1923, not a great time to be opening a distillery because it got hit by Prohibition and it closed down pretty shortly afterwards. It didn't last particularly long. All the stock was sold off, all the equipment was sold off, and it just remained like non-existent, as though it never happened. But the brand name still existed because there was still some stock that were being released as Gibson's Finest. And a company called Shenley Industries purchased the brand name in 1942. And in 1945, they built a distillery in Quebec, a place called... No, it's gone. I've forgotten, and I didn't write it down. So they built this distillery, but it wasn't until 1972 that they then decided that they were going to use Gibson's Finest as a brand name for this Canadian whisky. So Gibson's Finest is now a Canadian whisky, but originally it was this Pennsylvania rye whisky. Shenley became part of Guinness, which became part of Diageo, and in 2002, 2001, Diageo acquired quite a large part of Seagram's when they went into administration, and as part of that acquisition they gained Crown Royal, and all of a sudden Gibson's Finest as a brand became surplus to requirements. So in 2003 it was then bought by William Grant and Sons, sorry, not 2003, 2002, bought by William Grant & Sons, essentially to get themselves in the Canadian whisky market. Big Scotch producer, talking Balvenie, Glenfiddich, all that lot. And this was a way of getting into the Canadian market, which is basically Crown Royal, Canadian Club, and then this is the third biggest selling whisky, and still is the third biggest whisky, biggest selling whisky in Canada. And I think that's whisky full stop, not just Canadian whisky in Canada. So it's a big brand. Yes, it's not Crown Royal, and Diageo didn't need Gibson's Finest because we've got Crown Royal, but this was a really good chance for William Grant to end up going into the market. Now what's interesting is, and I read a news report from 2002 when they purchased it, this news report, I think it was the spirits business, were basically saying it'd be interesting to see what they do because Gibson's Finest is only available in Canada. This was at the time. This will be a chance for William Grant to expand the name worldwide. Now it's still only available in Canada, and I think it's because Crown Royal and Canadian Club are so big around the world. Why bother? It's too big. They've got the market almost sewn up. So just maintain your stronghold, grow your customer base in your heartland. And I think that's why they've made the business decision of, we're going to struggle if we try to compete with Crown Royal, and we're going to struggle if we compete with Canadian Club. They might have tried between 2002 and now, you might have found it in pockets around the world, but it sounds like it's obviously not taken off. The business decision has been, do you know what, let's maintain Canada, let's keep a strong hold, let's grow within Canada, and then maybe save it for another day. So this no longer is produced in Quebec, it's now in the Hiram Walker distillery, it's in Windsor, Ontario. They have three versions. They have the Gibson's Finest Sterling, which is a non-age statement, this particular one, which is 12-year-old, and they also do a Gibson's Finest Venerable, which is an 18-year-old. Now, Andrew has, I think he's taken a picture off the net of what the label looks like, which looks like this. Now, this is quite an old bottling. They have changed the label since that one. They have then redone it again, I think fairly recently, potentially within the last 12 to 18 months. So if you're looking for Gibson's Finest on the shelf, you're looking for this. And you're looking at about, I think for the 12-year-old, it was about $25 a bottle. Canadian dollars, it's about $25, I think, from what I can gather. So yes, there was I went on the Gibson's Finest website. They have, it's like a new, hey, look at our new label, with an advert that wasn't particularly brilliant either. So in terms of the makeup of this, it is a blended whiskey, so I don't know in terms of the percentage of corn, rye, whether there's any barley and that sort of thing. I've not been able to find that. So it's quite difficult with Canadian whiskey to find any information, to be perfectly honest. But let's see what this is like. Ooh. Now, this is quite fruity, but it's quite a light fruit. It's kind of peach and apricot and melon and brown sugar. Quite sweet. Seems to be a general theme at the moment with Canadian whiskies, is they tend to be on the sweeter side. But this is definitely apricot and melon and peach and a summer fruit salad, but not light. There's still a weight behind it. It's that kind of brown sugar that's just weighing it down a bit more. Maybe a little bit cloying. Perks up a little bit on the palate actually. It's not quite as cloying as it is on the nose. And again, melon, apricot, peach, soft pink fruits. Almost a bit of watermelon in there as well. The sweetness that you get from a watermelon. Not quite mouth-watering, but the sweetness you get from watermelon. Nice bit of toffee underlying it as well. There's a bit of bite to it. Ooh. And all of a sudden, a real burst of Werther's Originals. Really soft, sweet caramel came through there. It's just the right side of cloying. It's not overly sickly. It's close to. And I think if it was just a little bit more, I'd be thinking, this is a bit tacky. It's not quite coating your mouth like MSG, but it is quite a sweet whiskey. But it's just light enough, and there is a bit of an element of rye that's just drying it slightly and just holding that sweetness back, just kind of pulling it back from the brink of being just too sickly sweet. It's not bad at all, actually. I'd be interested to know what the sterling's like, the no age statement, because I do wonder whether the balance on this is because of the aging. I'd also be very interested to try the 18-year-old, because I think there's enough in there that an 18-year-old could be pretty good indeed. That is not bad at all. I can imagine for some people it's going to be a little bit too sickly sweet. And this mouthful just now, compared to the one before, was just on the other side of cloying. So I think if you're not in the right frame of mind, or you're not really in the mood for this type of whiskey, you're going to find it too sickly sweet. This might benefit from being poured from the fridge or the freezer, just to chill it down a bit, just to maybe take that little edge of sweetness off. But do you know what? It's not that bad. It's quite intriguing. There's a toffee-ish note really coming through as well. It's teetering. It's really teetering on the edge of being too sweet and too sickly. It just about holds its own. And my guess would be that either the non-age statement or the 18-year-old, one of those two is going to tip over the edge. Whether it's the young one because the sweetness is too full on, or the older one because it's the age has taken off the edginess of the rye. The rye just seems to be kind of holding this sweetness from diving off a cliff and just being too much. It's interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. But again, Canadian whiskies, the majority of them seem to be so far really on the sweet side, really erring on the sweet unless you go full on rye. Interesting stuff. Yeah, no, it's good. I like that one. I wasn't sure whether, the more it kind of lingered in my mouth, I wasn't sure whether I was really going for it, but actually that's pretty good. Quite like that one indeed. Okay, right, 211 down. See you at the next one. Cheers.